This is my Breath of the Wild map, a full-scale recreation of Hyrule inside of Minecraft. I spent the better part of 3 years working on this project, building every city, every guardian, every divine beast, literally the entire game. Wouldn't it be a shame if Breath of the Wild got a sequel that made this entire build obsolete? Just roll the intro card. The workload for this project is ridiculous. I'll have to scour the entire surface of Hyrule for any and all changes made between games. I'd have to dig out 147 new caves across the world, not to mention the dozens of floating sky islands that I need to build. And, where do I even begin with the depths? They're going to span across 36,000 blocks. Do I need to terraform all of it by hand? It's impossible. You can't do it. But it would be really cool, though. Dude, you said that last time, and the project ended up taking 2 years longer than you were planning. Too late, I already started. Alright, here's the plan. We're gonna knock out the entire northwestern corner of the map today, starting at Lookout Landing and making our way into Rito Village and Hebra. Once we add all of the new changes to the surface from Tears of the Kingdom, we'll move down into the depths and build whatever's down here. Does anything ever happen in the depths? Once that's done, we'll move back up to build all of the Sky Islands, ending with the Stormwind Ark and Colgera. Bro, you have doomed us. The depths are going to take years to build. Oh, don't worry. We have a plan for the depths that'll save us a bunch of time. The project officially began on August 3rd, 2025. The first order of business was to remove all of the Sheikah technology around the map, since none of that carried over to Tears. Every single guardian had to go, alongside the 120 shrines. Biggest of all, I destroyed every single divine beast, including the Death Mountain Smoke while I was at it. Starting at the center of the map, I first wanted to construct the Skyview Towers, since I would need one for Lookout Landing. We struggled for way too long to figure out what blocks to use for the netting near the bottom, eventually settling on copper grates. The proportions of the tower were a little tricky too, but it was a pretty standard first build. This tower wouldn't fit at Lookout Landing though, since the tower here is at a 45-degree angle, so I had to rotate my design to fit the diagonal angle. To make room for Lookout Landing, I had to remove all of the trees surrounding the Sacred Ground ruins before outlining where the walls would go and whipping up a simple wooden design for them. I carved out the moat and added the gatehouses before placing in my Skyview Tower design. While the lab was just a reused house design from Kakariko, the platform outside was unique and had to be built from scratch. Jamie, Sam, and Goat had all been working on the smaller details within the walls, including the underground area beneath the ruins, which turned out looking great. So with all of the final details coming together, Lookout Landing was finished, and I was very pleased with how our first build turned out. My next plan was to follow the path west and build our way up into northwestern Hyrule, but there was still some important builds I needed to finish that would be copy-pasted all across the map. The Shrines of Light being the most obvious example. I already built these a few years back in my Great Sky Island video, and their design still holds up really well, so I decided to keep it. I did have to make a diagonal variant to fit certain angles, and I also edited their design to have open doorways. Because, just like last time, Sam has returned to build all 152 shrine interiors for this map, so be on the lookout for that. There are also hundreds of these rocks all over Hyrule that fell from the Sky Islands above, and you'd better believe that I have to build every single one. So I built up a few different designs to use across the map. These rocks tend to be very blocky, which I replicated by combining multiple different squares and rectangles, which I think matches the style of Tears quite well. Once this corner of Central Hyrule was finished, we moved across the bridge into the Ridgeland. At this point, we began to run into our first surface caves, but I'm not going to explain how we did them just yet, because it'll tie into our plan for the depths later on. Instead, just across the river, we had to tackle our first geoglyph. There are 4 glyphs in the region that we're completing today, so let's knock them all out now. The Raru glyph was up first, and it was at quite an annoying angle. I outlined most of the glyph first to ensure that we were working on a good scale before I began detailing the head. Voxel and Sam were there to help with detailing the body, and it was honestly a pretty straightforward build. We just took things one line at a time, and eventually we traced everything out. Now, I need to ask you a very important question. What block do you think we should choose to color the geoglyphs? Maybe lime concrete powder? Or how about endstone? Verdant frog lights? Well, congratulations, you've just joined a gang. Welcome to the war, kid. Join up with the rest of your faction and prepare for battle because this is serious. The way chat was arguing for their block choice made it sound like their lives were on the line. Most people wanted verdant frog lights, while I was pretty much the only one who wanted lime concrete powder. This argument lasted for days, and things were getting heated. Team frog lights was ruthless, man. I woke up one night to find all the lights in my house had been replaced with frog lights. They were trying to scare me, bro. They were sending a message. And suddenly on day 2, nobody was rooting for endstone anymore. I think Froglights got to them, man. They were wiped out in the middle of the night or something. Everyone in my community was still arguing about the color days later when we got to the second geoglyph, that being the Sonia one near Satori Mountain. We took the same approach as the Rauru glyph with this one, outlining the entire thing to establish a scale before designing from the head downwards. Shaping the hand gave me quite a hard time, but I finally figured out before helping the others with the hair design. With the shape finished, we once again tried to agree on a color to choose, but this time I brought a nuke with me. The endstone completely blends in with the sand around it for this glyph, and the Froglights didn't look much better either. And even if they did, the Ganondorf glyph in Hebra is surrounded by snow, and once again, the Froglights just completely blend in with the terrain around it, while the concrete powder sticks out across all surfaces. My nuke had landed, and everyone was finally agreeing that the concrete powder was the least worst option we had, putting an end to the war. And with the war finally over, I could finally sleep in peace without a diamond sword under my pillow for emergencies. But in the morning, I woke up to find this comment from Mogswamp with an actual good suggestion for the geoglyph color. The only real downside with this idea is that the line art becomes thicker and less defined with this border, but at this point, I'm so tired of this conflict that I'm just going to settle with it for now, and we'll figure it out later. There are still 2 glyphs to build in Hebra. The first was incredibly small and symmetrical, making it the easiest one by far. However, it's placed on a cliffside, which blurs the shape a lot, especially with the concrete powder outline making it thicker. But I didn't feel like there was much more I could do to make this look better. The final one to tackle was the massive Ganondorf glyph, and thank God this one wasn't on a diagonal angle. I started by designing the head, which was turning out weird at first, but would eventually come together when the rest of the glyph was complete. Moving down the shoulder and arm, the hand gave me tons of grief once again. I had to tinker with the thickness and the positioning of the fingers a ton before finding the right shape. The hair was only partially symmetrical, and it took me about an hour to string the final lines of the glyph and place it into the snow below. It turned out looking really cool, and boy am I glad I don't have to think about these for a while. Despite the glyphs being done, we still have to go back and finish up the rest of the surface, but most of the changes are pretty minor, so let's go ahead and speedrun some of this. I had to place in the new stable near the Rauru glyph, as well as a ton of fallen rocks in the area and some new enemy camps. There was another Skyview tower nearby, some shrines, and some minor changes in the Ridgeland area. There was a new double skull camp design that I had to fuse together, tons of fallen rocks, with lots of them being unique designs, including this one with a chest inside. Tabantha didn't have many major changes, it was mostly just new enemy camps and some small differences in the terrain, so we quickly made it to Rito Village. When you first arrive here in Tears, the area is completely frozen over due to the blizzard produced by Colgera, and this was the state I wanted to build the village in. So I added more snow into the area and changed some of the coloring on the Rito rock pillar and surrounding islands to make it look icy. We also changed the first bridge to be broken, just like in game, and Goat modified the interior of the stable to turn it into the Lucky Clover Gazette. The village itself surprisingly had no changes to it, apart from having more snow covering the place, which we also added in. Moving into Hebra, there wasn't much for me to do here. There were a lot of new ruins exclusive to the area, especially in the training grounds, but a lot of them were reused assets, so I only had to build a few. One of them was the platform where Tulin loses his bow, and the others were near the peak of Hebra where the Rising Island chain starts. But we won't begin work on those until we finish the depths. The southern field had a bunch of these ruins as well. There was a huge enemy outpost to build, but that was pretty much it. There is a great fairy fountain in the area, but of course we already designed those in Breath of the Wild, so I just had to move this one over. The Zonai Labyrinth was unchanged, but the gloom patches were all new, so I had to go through and remove all of the malice from Breath of the Wild to add in the new ones. And finally, the Forgotten Temple in Tanagar Canyon now has a new room behind the goddess statue. I rotated the statue to have it properly tipped over and started on the Chamber of the Sages. After finishing up the main room, including Sonia's grave, I moved into the back room that was going to prove to be tricky. Not only were there many versions of the geoglyphs on the walls, but also a small-scale map of Hyrule. Well, there's the Rauru. There's Rauru. It's actually not too bad. I think I did about the best I could. This one's supposed to be Rauru. This one's the Sheikah Slate. We got the Tear. We got the Master Sword. So, I mean, it could be a lot worse. This tool right here allows me to raise terrain if I right click, as you can see here. And I've loaded the entire Breath of the Wild map as a height map for this. So theoretically, if I just click in the middle here, it's not beautiful, but it is kind of a rough map of the terrain, as you can see. So with one click, we already have a pretty good baseline for the map to work with. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I think this is good. After a few weeks of work, the surface for northwestern Hyrule had been fully updated to tiers, but there was still one detail missing. Within this region, there are 3 different Gleeoks that I still needed to build, and I knew that building a 3-headed dragon on such a small scale would not be easy. Starting with the Flame Gleeok in Tabantha, I tried to begin with a block shape for the body to carve out details, but it wasn't working too well, so we decided to just shape it all from scratch. Once Goat and I had a body that we thought was decent, I began detailing the heads. Without much room to work with, it was extremely tough to come up with something good, but with hundreds of suggestions from Twitch chat, we got a decent design down. But it would change later. In the meantime, Voxel had been working on his own shape for the body that I preferred over mine, so we switched over to his, but I still edited the shape and size a lot until we found a body shape that I was happy with. Finally, we just had to color the Gleeok and add some last details to complete the dragon. But not every Gleeok is found standing on the ground like this, but instead flying in the air. So Hyrath came in and used my design to create a flying variant that we could also use for the map, which I needed for the Frost Gleeoks found in Hebra. I came back many times to change the details of the head, even using some ideas from this person in my Discord server. I eventually settled on this design and placed the Frost Gleeoks around Hebra, meaning the surface was finally finished. Sorry to keep you waiting. You ready to talk about the depths now? Yes, finally! What's the surprise that you mentioned earlier? What do you have planned? Let's start at the beginning. If I had to terraform all of the depths by hand, I wouldn't have even started this project. So I started looking into methods I could use to generate the terrain of the depths using external software. If you remember, back when I started the Breath of the Wild map, I used a software called World Painter to take a height map of Hyrule and convert it into Minecraft blocks, giving me a bare bones world to start building in. I immediately thought of doing the same thing with the depths, but there were some problems with this method. I couldn't find a height map of the depths anywhere online, but as I'm sure a lot of you know, the terrain of the depths is identical to the surface, just inverted. So what if I used the surface map and inverted the colors to create the depths? I did try this, and while it yielded decent results, it was still far from perfect. For starters, this map doesn't include the walls and ceiling of the depths, meaning I would still have to build all of that myself. And the depths aren't actually a perfect mirror of the surface. There are plenty of small differences all over the place that I would have to terraform myself. But this would still save me time over doing it all by hand. That was, if there wasn't another problem. I had to combine the world that contains the depths with the tiers world, a feat which didn't seem possible. No world editing software allowed me to do it, so I tried using World Painter to directly import the map into the tiers world, but that only created whatever this abomination is. Things were looking pretty bad at this point. I might just have to do them all by hand after all.
Hey Grazzy, what's up?
Oh, hey Howzieky. I've just been trying to generate the depths using a height map, but it's just not working out. I'm probably gonna have to do them all by hand.
Why don't you just write a script to read the terrain data from tiers and use Amulet to convert that data into Minecraft blocks, generating them directly into the world and perfectly scaling them to fit with the existing Breath of the Wild map?
You can do that?
Obviously.
With the help of Mr. Cheese and DT132, Howzieky researched how the terrain of the depths worked, and then he wrote a script using a world editing software called Amulet to convert that data into Minecraft blocks. He spent days optimizing the script and tweaking settings, doing tons of test generations to ensure that everything was working properly, and things were looking promising. And because this method was reading the terrain data directly from tiers, not only would it generate a perfect floor map, but it would also generate the walls and ceiling too. This could potentially save me years of time by cutting out all of the terraforming work in the depths. After weeks of work, Howzieky finally had a complete world to show me, and I opened it up for the very first time. The script worked flawlessly. We now had a perfect replica of the depths. Of course, this only generated the terrain, so we would still have to worry about all of the trees, ruins, everything else. Using the same method, Howzieky also read the terrain data of every single surface cave and generated their empty shells into the world, giving us a good starting point for those as well. Goat took up the task of completing all of the caves found in this region. She spent hours going through every single one, implementing all the shrines, the enemy camps, the Misko treasure chests. I only helped her out with a few of the smaller caves, so all of the credits for caves in this episode should go to her. Wow, so you weren't just being stupid and throwing away years of my life. You actually had a plan. Yeah, shut the hell up. I know what I'm doing. Sometimes. Alright, first order of business in the depths, we need to give everything its proper color instead of this barf mix. It took literal days of experimenting to not only find out what to color everything, but also the fastest method to do so. I ended up learning a little bit about how Lua scripts work so that I could write my own script brushes to speed up the painting process. Just don't even ask, it's a whole other can of worms that took like 3 days to figure out. So let's just finally start building. First, I need to build all of the trees that belong down here, of which there are 3 types. Mushroom trees, the weird one, and whatever the hell this is. Each one has 3 different size variants, so I had a lot to build. As expected, the color on these were pretty tricky to match in Minecraft, leaving me to take some creative liberties. This weird pod up here caused so many arguments that I had to pull out the hex codes to prove chat wrong. But even after that, they didn't accept it. Okay, I just win because this dude just said, "Ask ChatGPT." If you're ever arguing and you say to ask ChatGPT, I'm going to laugh hysterically in your face. Grok, what color is this? Let's ask Grok, yeah. See, if you said ask Grok, maybe I would have given you more credit. The tall, curvy one was the easiest one to build, but the purple leaves caused a bit of concern here. I ended up making my own custom biome for the depths, which changes the color of leaves to purple, adds in some green fog, and also mimics some other aspects of the depths. The final asset I needed to build were the light roots. The shape wasn't too hard to make, and I perfectly replicated every single root that goes across the light bulb. I'm very happy with how this turned out, but at the suggestion of some of my friends, I came back later to make the front bulge out a bit more, which was definitely an improvement. Alright, what else is there to build down here in the depths? Oh, absolutely nothing. There were some small things like the enemy camps, the rock pillars with purified weapons on them, these platforms all over the depths with Zonai devices on them. I came up with this design for the wings, but everything else was so small that I just used some copper blocks for them. A lot of the enemy camps are duplicates of each other, so the more of these that I built, the quicker I was able to move through the depths later on. Under the Raru geoglyph was one of these ascend pillars, which I was able to whip up in about 15 minutes. But after that, this whole area was pretty much copy and paste until I got to the first Yiga base. There are dozens of Yiga clan bases around the depths, and while most of them are unique, they always have these same 2 buildings in them. So after I built them up here, I could reuse them for the other bases. Apart from that, this entire area was pretty much empty. I was still running into some new enemy camps to build, but apart from those, I was just pasting in Zonai platforms, weapon shrines, and trees. There was a Queen Gibdo arena near Satori Mountain, and while I do plan on building all of the bosses, I'm going to wait until I get to their respective temples. So for now, I just built the arena and nothing else. After that, I kept trudging along, pasting assets in, building new Yiga bases, and moving along. As I finally made it under Thunder Plateau, I encountered these Rito statues that lead towards the Rito mine, which were tricky to build due to the small scale. I had to make a diagonal one too, which sucked even more. Apart from that, literally this entire area is just reused assets. There's nothing worth showing here. I knocked it all out in a few hours. Originally, I was going to reuse my Flux construct design from the Great Sky Island video, but it really wasn't that good, and not centered for some reason, so I gave it a little makeover to make it bigger and better, and centered. But soon enough, I got to potentially the hardest build of the video. Just beneath the Chamber of the Sages is one of the Bargainer statues. And, I mean, do I have to explain why this was going to be hard? Shaping the body of the statue took so long. I spent like 4 hours on this statue before I was finally satisfied. Something about it just felt off until the very end, when I finally fixed up the legs and the proportions felt right. I also discovered that these dudes have a second face in the middle of their backs. I've seen literally nobody talk about this, but it's there alright. I had to rotate this design to fit the diagonal angle of the cliff, and was very relieved to call this thing done, marking what was roughly the halfway point for the depths in this episode. But there is literally nothing worth showing in the other half. Come on, there's gotta be something worth showing down here. Not really. I mean, I built the underground labyrinth, but all the designs were the exact same as the surface labyrinth. Okay, well, what about the Hebra Dark Skeleton? Oh yeah, I guess there's that. I reused the same rib and spine designs from the Breath of the Wild map, but the skull had to be made fresh, which looks a little weird due to the amount of holes in it. And finally, there was the Rito Abandoned Mine, where you fight Master Koga for the last time. I struggled a little bit on the boss arena structure for some reason, but figured it out pretty quickly. There wasn't anything too crazy going on in the back, but there was a crystal refinery here, which was a little tough due to the scale, but with it finally over, I was so happy to call the depths complete at long last. The depths were not nearly as bad as I thought they were going to be. I could just kinda turn my brain off and work for hours on end, but now there's only one region left to complete in this episode: the skies above Hebra. There's no fancy trick to generate the islands, I just had to build them all by hand, starting with this chain above Thunder Plateau. This small island was the first one I would build for this project, which immediately taught me a lot about how to approach these islands. Just like the fallen rocks across the surface, the undersides of these islands are made from a collection of vertical rectangular blocks. So the method I started using for the islands was to outline the surface area to begin, add spires to the bottom if the islands had any, then add multiple rectangular blocks to the underside before coloring the entire thing. This island also had one of those big Zonai gumball machines, and while I originally reused the one I designed a few years ago in the Great Sky Island video, I'm just not very happy with it anymore. So I ended up redesigning it and it came out a lot better. Above is the diving challenge for a piece of the gliding armor set, and I immediately realized how annoying it was going to be to map all of these precise shapes out. It wasn't too bad at first since it was just basic circles, but it gets a lot more complex above. It took me so long to finish these islands because I could not focus on them for more than a couple minutes at a time and just kept procrastinating. But once it was finally over, there was just one final small island above them to complete, finishing the first island chain. Moving into Tabantha, we have a large archipelago of islands to complete, but nothing too crazy was going on. I outlined the first few islands, finished up the underside before adding the various small ruins atop them. It was pretty much the same story with most of the islands in the archipelago. They each had a small patch of ruins on them, but that was it. The exceptions were the Flux Construct Arena, but I already built that arena in the depths, so that was another reused asset. But there was another massive island nearby that proved to be quite a pain. This was a unique island because it was mostly rock and stone instead of whatever this material is. It didn't take too long to terraform, with the top side being this lake with a strange obelisk in the middle. This acts as a mirror of light that goes into a small cave that goes through the island. So of course I was a whiny baby about that before I finally got to work. It wasn't even that hard, I was just being dramatic. The cave leads into this cylindrical structure near the bottom that goes to a shrine, but it was all pretty trivial. This marked the end of this archipelago, but there were still some random islands scattered around the area. There was this chain of 3 connected by rails that had a bunch of ruins on them, but pretty much all the sky islands here have the same few ruins copy and pasted over and over again. Moving into Hebra, we have this large island here, which houses one of the few King Gleeoks in the game. This was the design that I whipped up for the Thunder Gleeok before I merged all their heads together to form King Gleeok. The underside of this island was huge, so it took a while to finish up, but the top side was just a bunch of reused assets again. And the dragon, of course. The island chain above Western Hebra mostly consisted of smaller islands, which made them pretty quick to finish up. I needed some of the floating Zonai platforms here, but I had once again already made these a few years back. Far across in Eastern Hebra, there was another island chain of almost entirely reused assets, except for this large island here. I believe this island is reused for a lot of shrine quests in other parts of the sky, so I was glad to be knocking this out now. It also had these unique small trees along its length, so I spent some time adding those in place, and I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. The smaller details like this are what make me really enjoy these builds. And finally, we have the floating labyrinth. I was not looking forward to this one. Luckily, the walls of the floating labyrinth are the same as the surface one, so I just had to reuse the same design with some minor editing and stack it up twice to make it taller. There were some smaller islands between the surface and the labyrinth, so I built up all of those first because I was procrastinating doing the interior. I could only procrastinate so long, so soon enough I got started on the interior and wrapped it up in a few hours. And yes, it was just as terrible as I thought it would be. And after building up the small island with the stone tablets, all of the sky islands in Hebra were complete. Hooray! Except for, the vast majority of them. Yeah, if we want to build the Stormwind Ark and Colgera today, we first have to trudge through the Rising Island chain. This massive archipelago with dozens of islands that lead up to the Wind Temple. Dude, can these clouds get out of the way so I can get a good shot? Oh, they actually disappeared. Starting at Hebra Peak, I began building my way upwards, and things were quite jolly at first. I was feeling pretty good, but as I got further up, I realized that almost none of these islands were reused assets. Almost every single island up here was unique. And remember, there are like a billion of them. Handcrafting every single island was starting to wear away at my morale, but I was at least excited to build up the first flying boat. There are 2 different sizes of these boats, and I wouldn't encounter the bigger one until much higher up, so I only built this one for now. The only trouble I experienced was with the round bird head near the front. I kept trudging along, and soon enough I entered a flow state where I wasn't really thinking about how miserable this was, which allowed me to keep pushing. At this point, we were well over 100 hours of work for this video, so I was just excited to finish this up ASAP and finally publish the video. I eventually ran into the larger floating ship design, which was basically the exact same thing, except get this, it was bigger, so it wasn't that hard to finish up. The upper regions of the island chain had more reused assets, the islands were fewer and further between, allowing me to finish them up much quicker. So after a couple days of working on the Rising Island chain, we finally made it to the Stormwind Ark. I went into this thinking, yeah, I could finish this build up over the next couple days. It took 30 hours of building to complete. Yeah, this thing is a lot more detailed than I remember. To start, I outlined the general shape of the boat with some large rectangles before I started designing. Sam joined in to help when I started detailing and was there to assist for nearly all 30 hours of this build. His eyes were definitely needed because he was actually capable of seeing all the red details on this ship. Literally before he pointed this out, I did not know that the Ark had any red on it. We started with the side of the ship, working our way down towards the bottom. There's a large cannon on either side of the boat, so we built those up as well and marked out the large doorways to the interior. Some parts of the ship were lined up around the secret stone pedestal, while others were lined up with the center of the ship, which led to some weird alignment issues along the bottom. Like, why are these not centered properly? It threw us for a loop when we were working down here, but we managed to figure everything out. Moving to the back of the ship, there are these 5 tails that curve outwards, which were unusually tricky to get the shape down for. We had to tinker with these for quite a bit before we were happy with them. We connected everything up to the underside of the ship, leaving just the front unfinished. And oh boy, were we in for it. The front of the ship not only has these massive bird heads, but also these enormous diagonal wings on the side, which just look like so much fun to build. We outlined the shape for the head and the neck, but our first attempt at outlining the wings would not end up sticking. We tinker with the shape of this thing a lot more. We then got to work designing the neck, working our way upwards, because we thought it would be easier than the wings. The head had these 3 red feathers sticking out of it that made our bird look like a chicken for a long time, but once we finished up the eye and the beak, it looked a lot better, and I was pretty pleased with the result. As for the wings, we tried for a long time to perfect the shape and find something that both Sam and I agreed was good. But we finally figured it out after getting a third opinion. Detailing this was a chore and a half because of the angles, but it was worth it in the end because this looks incredible. All that was left was to connect the neck down to the underside of the ship, and we were finally done with most of the exterior. We still have the top side of the boat to build. The center of the boat has quite the intricate pattern around it, but the rest was just regular brick, so I painted it as a noise pattern to fit the palette. Toby joined to help Sam and I for the building near the front of the ship, which we knocked out quickly due to its small size and its symmetry. But the rear building was going to be tough. We finished the smaller side buildings first, but in front of them are these 2-dimensional bird statues that looked really hard at first, but were actually quite simple. We were able to reuse the bird head from the large ship design and tinker it slightly to fit with the statues here. The back tower was the only spot of the Ark that had a gray stone texture to it, so we introduced tough blocks into the palette to get that part done. Now, the only remaining part of the exterior were the large rotating oars on either side. Again, I thought these were going to be pretty hard at first, but they were really pretty straightforward, and I am incredibly pleased with how this turned out. This might be one of the best builds in the entire project. I can't show most of the interior work due to the tight corridors making replay footage messy, but here are a few clips and some pieces of raw footage from the process. All of the hallways had the same wall designs, so a lot of it turned into tedious copy and pasting. But even after the interior was finished, I still wanted to build Colgera in the skies above the Ark. I thought Colgera was going to be hard, but it was honestly a breeze. Sam and Ezio joined to help with this build, and we immediately perfected the shape of the head. And while they worked on the 2 giant mandibles, I took a shot at the claw and the wings, which I also immediately perfected, no second tries needed. After adding some spikes and other details to the circular body segments, we had a complete outlined body of Colgera in just 40 minutes. We began working on colors, for which I mostly relied on Ezio and Sam's input for obvious reasons. We used redstone lamps for the eyes, and after it was colored, we stitched the body together to complete Colgera. At long last, I was able to place all of the smaller ships surrounding the Ark and finish the last sky islands above, completing the skies of Hebra after dozens of hours.